The Secret Doctrine, written over 100 years ago, points to the fact that we live in a universe of contrasts and polarities. Light and shadow, mountain and valley, day and night, youth and old age, life and death. The list is endless. The rich variety in nature and in our own inner life results from distinctions and oppositions.
The Secret Doctrine explains that when the two aspects of this primal duality polarize, or pull apart, so to speak, the tension between them sets up a field which gives rise to the universe, to all manifestation. The real power behind creation is a rhythmic alternation of stress or tension between the poles, a pulsating relationship between spirit and matter.
An ordinary magnet gives us hints about the dynamics of this fundamental polarity. The strong attractions and repulsions of the field surrounding a magnet govern the behavior of iron particles sprinkled in the field, and they take on pattern and organization. Perhaps similarly, the universe latent in the one takes shape through the dynamic interplay of the two poles of spirit and matter.
In our second videotape presentation, we discussed how motion manifests as ever-recurrent cycles. Alan Watts describes the dance in Hindu mythology in which the many-armed Shiva, wreathed in fire, destroys the universe at the end of each cycle. But Shiva is simply the opposite face of Brahma, the creator, so that as he turns to leave with the world in ruin, the scene changes with his turning, and all things are seen to have been remade under the cover of their destruction.
Since everything in the manifested universe is a combination of spirit or consciousness and matter, then even so-called inert matter has a degree of consciousness or responsiveness. We must remember that, simply because we do not perceive any signs which we can recognize of consciousness, say, in stones, we have no right to say that no consciousness exists there. There is no organ or local site in organisms which is necessary for consciousness to emerge. Life sprang from the intricate combination of molecules. To some scientists, this implies that consciousness must be implicit in matter itself, and that all matter holds the possibility of life or consciousness or mind.
Scientists in the field of physics are beginning to see relationships between things once considered unique and separate. Radiation, for example, light, and matter were once considered completely separate, but are now found to have common attributes. Niels Bohr, in the early part of this century, introduced the term complementarity to try to explain this phenomenon of light appearing as both waves and particles. In other words, in seeing a wave or a particle, we observe complementary aspects of reality.
Probably one of the clearest examples of complementarity can be seen in the picture of a vase made of two profiles used by the Gestalt psychologists. Is it a vase or two profiles? You can see it as either, depending on which image is figure and which is background. But you cannot see it as both simultaneously. It is a perfect example of observer-created reality. You decide the reality you are going to see. And yet the definitions of what is the vase and what is the profile depend on each other. You cannot have one without the other. They are different representations of the same underlying reality. Here, simply a piece of black and white paper.
It is within the illumined mind of man that the opposing viewpoints of scientists and occultists may be resolved. The scientific mind sees law from below, from the outside, and climbs painfully toward a synthesis by experiment and observation and reasoning. The occultist sees law from within as the expression of living principles, but perhaps loses detail in the vision of the whole. Within the illumined mind of truly human man, the scientific and occult viewpoints are experienced as complementary aspects of one whole, the universal and absolute law of harmony and rhythm.
For example, the rational and the intuitive are complementary modes of functioning of the human mind. Rational thinking is linear, focused, and analytic. Its function is to discriminate, measure, and categorize. Thus, rational knowledge tends to be fragmented. Intuitive knowledge is based on a direct experience of reality, arising in an expanded state of awareness. It tends to be synthesizing, holistic, and non-linear.
Perhaps the simplest and most concise, not to mention the oldest, symbol of the integrated interplay of the two modes of consciousness is the ancient Tai Chi symbol of the Chinese. It symbolizes not only the synergistic totality of the two modes of consciousness, but also the interaction of day and night, life and death, masculine and feminine, existence and non-existence. Therefore, it is possible to develop a general framework for some of the principal polarities in life, represented by the concepts yin and yang. Earth, heaven, contractive, expansive, dark, light, passive, active, cooperative, competitive, intuitive, rational.
In Chinese culture, yin and yang have never been associated with moral values. What is good is not yin or yang, but the dynamic balance between the two. What is bad or harmful is imbalance. The dot of light appearing in the dark yin side and the dot of dark in the light yang side show that each side contains the potential of becoming the other. The dark and the light, yin and yang, do not represent two absolutes, but the two major aspects of a dynamic unity and the components of a process which is self-transforming. Shadow is that which enables light to manifest itself and gives it objective reality. Therefore, shadow is not evil, but is the necessary and indispensable corollary which completes light or good. It is its creator on earth.
No less evident is the tension between the sexes, where the effects of an apparent dualism have been most dramatically graphic, where the struggle for synthesis has been most real. The question of duality, of feminine and masculine, begs resolution, for as long as individuals perceive life in terms of duality, their pain and illusion continues. This resolution does not come in the form of one side overcoming the other. The resolution of the conflict implied in duality comes through synthesis, and only through synthesis. A superb sculpture of Shiva in the Hindu temple of Elephanta shows three faces of the god. On the left, his male profile displaying virility and willpower. On the right, his female aspect, gentle, charming, seductive. And in the center, the sublime union of the two aspects in the magnificent head of Shiva Mahesvara, the great Lord, radiating serene tranquility and transcendental aloofness. In the same temple, Shiva is also represented in androgynous form, half male, half female. The flowing movement of the god's body and the serene detachment of his/her face symbolizing again the dynamic unification of the male and female.
The truth is that all these attributes are without gender and can be expressed equally in anyone's nature, regardless of sex. The most complete women, therefore, are those who have synthesized strength, courage, and initiative, for example, with compassion, warmth, and sensitivity. The most complete men, following the same example, are those who have synthesized compassion, warmth, and sensitivity with strength, courage, and initiative. The key is wholeness relative to all human attributes.
The mystic, therefore, transcends the realm of intellectual concepts, and in transcending it, he becomes aware of the relativity and polar relationship of all opposites. He realizes that good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, are not absolute experiences belonging to different categories, but are merely two sides of the same reality, extreme parts of a single whole. On the other hand, the Buddha's teaching does not attempt to deny the importance of differentiation in favor of absolute oneness, or to proclaim the undifferentiated equality of all things. It does not strive after the destruction or devaluation of contrasts, but after the recognition of their relativity within a unity, existing simultaneously with them, within them, and beyond them. Each phenomenon is a unique expression of the whole, unique in its spatial, temporal, and causal position.
It is proper for the Theosophist to have his head in the clouds, provided his feet are firmly planted on the earth, and love fills his heart. Only then can his hands be dedicated to effective service. Service that is neither practical but uninspired, nor yet inspired but unpractical. Only such a man, spanning heaven and earth in his understanding, can with a sure grasp draw the triumphant future toward the troubled present.